Let's pause and let me do a prayer here. Lord God, we are thankful that we could be used in any way for welcoming people, because that is probably such a wonderful ministry that really allows your grace to be shown. There's so many things that go on in ministry here of this church, but they would never be able to fully enjoy that, even worship here, if they walked in the doors and it was a cold welcome with no one there. Their hearts would be closed to what you perhaps would do. So thankful, Lord, that we can be used as an instrument of your grace and mercies, welcoming everyone, anyone and everyone, into this building for a wide variety of activities and educational experiences. So I ask your blessing on all of those who have been a part of this so faithfully, Lord. Help them to, in this time that we have today, to even have a wider and deeper understanding of the value of what we do, that is so much more than shaking hands and smiling at people. It is a deep, deep way of showing forth your love and grace to everyone. We thank you for the opportunities that you've given us and what you will have for us in the future through this ministry of hospitality. In Christ's name, amen. Let me say a few more words, Shaun, and I'll invite you to come up. I just want to share a story. A few years back, my daughter, who had gotten married, and married a Texan, and so they lived in Houston, Texas, and we're a part of a wonderful Presbyterian church in Houston that they enjoy. But then they moved to Tyler, Texas, up in the Piney Woods area, back where my son-in-law originally grew up. And I was down there for a visit. I wanted them to find a Presbyterian church in Tyler. So we went to First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas. And it was a beautiful church, and it was probably maybe a membership of 300 to 400 members. And we walked in the door, and there were a couple of ushers there, and nobody really welcomed us. It would be obvious that we were new. Here I am with my wife, Debbie, and my son-in-law and my daughter, and we're walking in. Here's a young couple that would be very much, I think, wanted to be involved in the life of this church, and nobody really walks. We got a bulletin. We sat down. Nobody spoke to us in the pew. There was a short passing of the peace, but after that, and we walked out of the doors of there, and nobody said, come back, or glad you came, or invited them to be involved in anything in that church. Well, needless to say, my son-in-law and daughter are not at that church. They had to go to find another church. Recently, over the years, I'll go out on a free Sunday to one of our churches around the area, and I'll visit some of the larger churches that are popular, just to see what they're doing. And walking into those places, I don't find in any of them, and I've gone to 4 or 5 of them, that have hospitality hose. They can be somewhat friendly. The ushers are there, but there's nobody there that says to me, I'm glad you're here, or I'm glad you came. And what a difference when you walk into this place and we see you all standing there waiting for us and are there with a smile and a caring heart that really makes people walking in the doors of Second Presbyterian Church feel like this has got to be a special place, and opens their heart up for God. That's why I believe that welcoming ministry like this is so essential. If you look at statistics, why does a new person go back to that church that they had gone to for the first time? And the far exceeding percentage of people, it was because of the friendliness. 52% on a survey said they came back because of the friendliness. Only 36% said it because it was the sermon. So you are more important. You are more important than the pastor's sermon. Okay. So you're part of an overall way in which we try to welcome people here, particularly new people, and that is so key for you as you're looking out to see who's coming in the doors, if there's somebody that looks new, to greet them. We have a welcome team that meets on Monday and visits all of those folks, follows up on everybody who's there for the very first time. We have ambassadors ministries that meet a couple of times a month on a Saturday to make phone calls, to be able to invite people to be a part of our church and join it and become a part of our family. Some of you are new here who are now hospitality hosts. You've benefited from that. So the hospitality hosts are a part of an overall picture in which we, in every way we can, want to welcome people, particularly new people, into the family of God here at Second. We're real blessed today. Some of you have gotten to know. Shaun has come on board with Gretchen Brown and Larry Treadwell to form a triumphant who lead our ministry on Sundays here. Shaun's very gifted, like I said earlier. His background, education-wise, human relations, and theological training that he has had, to be able to lead us today in what he's going to teach us and help us to be able to really fully grasp what we're all a part about. I think it's awesome. And later on, we'll get into some of the more details and the practicalities. Gretchen and Larry will be up here to share some things, and I'll share some things of how our procedures can go and how we can improve on that in any way possible that we can. But thank you, Shaun, for being here. Come on up and lead us in this time. We appreciate you being willing to do that for us.
Good morning. I'm a bit intimidated to stand in front of you because I'm really honored. I've been a member here at Second Presbyterian for really a year. And I'm here because of you. The image that I put up here on the screen is I was a stranger and you welcomed me. For me and my wife, that is a profound and true statement. As we entered the doors here at Second Pres, we came trembling, to be honest with you, because of the experiences that we've had in life, in church, were tremendous in some ways, and very, very painful and gut-wrenching in other ways. We served in some places that were hard. And there were a part of our lives when we swore off church. We weren't going to go back because we didn't want to face that again and that pain. And we literally came trembling. And speaking personally, and if my wife was here, she'd be the first to raise her hand and say thank you, because we are really here because of the men and women who greeted us on that Sunday and the following Sundays and on Mondays and Tuesdays and Wednesdays and all the other days that we're here. You have treated us so well. Really. Maybe you've saved our spiritual lives. And so thank you for allowing God to work through your eyes and your ears and your hands and all the things that you do to serve this congregation. Personal testimony right here. Okay. One of the things that I wanted to do, I should back up, and Jim and Gretchen and Larry, they approached me and said, what do you think about doing an appreciation breakfast and kind of making it a training? And as we sat and put our heads together, one of the things that came out of that conversation is we wanted to make it more than informational. We wanted to make it transformational. That's one of our deep set goals for today. We wanted to thank you and then somehow create a spirit in here that would refresh us all. That was our overarching goal. And one of the things that I want to do this morning on your tables, right here, there's some people here. And I've created stories. Before you look at them, let me kind of give you some instructions. Each of these stories are true. These are all people that I've met within the past 2 to 3 weeks. And a lot of people kind of tell me their life story, which is kind of fun to hear. And so I thought it would be neat to put these stories, these sacred stories, to print and to have us discuss those today. The reason I want to do that is I want you to again see beyond my testimony the fact that what we do here is amazing. And later on we're going to talk about how it's so theologically based and biblically based. We're going to talk all about that. But this, I think, is going to give you an impression that what you do on Sunday mornings or on Wednesday evenings or whenever it is you do it is something special. So what I'm going to have you do is, within your table, go ahead and read your two stories, your two sacred stories, your two scenarios. And then I want you to talk about those. And I'm going to put on the screen some things that I want you to talk about. And then we're going to have this kind of interactive sharing where you're going to talk about what it might have been like to be this person and what God might want us to do for this person. Fair enough? So go ahead, read these aloud, read them together, and then I'll put some questions on the board that will help facilitate that conversation, and then I'll go around the room and we'll all share together the way this church can impact these kinds of sacred stories. There you are.
You don't really know much about church or Christianity. You don't know how to act. You definitely don't know anything about the Bible. You want to feel like you're probably there yourself. As you approach the building, you remember that church is not, you tell yourself, this is going to be good.
That one's real. That's real. All of these are real. They're all real.
Glad you didn't put my name after.
That one's about Ron Snow. Got me to turn that off.
Gee.
Let me.
They probably have at least 40, 80 employees or 150 small business personal, very successful. You said really no liver. And that would be
Yeah, looking for a place to belong.
I think God wants to say to them, come on, come on in. Well, you're on to something. Talking. Yeah.
Whatever made him remember something was not there, didn't come first. And of course, we wouldn't know just by us being friends might encourage all through the church.
When we came here, I didn't feel very much
That one little note about the family that came in, and they were glad that somebody said welcome, but they were still didn't know. And we talked way back about the magnetic church. We talked about the deer in the headlight look. And one of the jobs, I'm sure you're going to address this somewhere, one of the jobs of the greeters
But that's what I'm saying.
upstairs, when we have a lot of new people come in from the top, they would recognize that deer in the headlight look because it's just there.
Yeah.
You guys had that when you came in.
Yeah.
And you've got this part of the skill of this leadership is to recognize that and take them aside and make sure you say more than a greet. They can say, I can introduce you to some people afterwards. My name is so. I mean, just get into it deeper, make them feel better. But some people come in and they get smiles all over them. And you know they're new, but you don't say. But the deer in the headlight look is the person.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I've gone into the didn't save it, and so I can I tell
Okay, I'll give you about another minute or so, and then we'll talk about this experience.
You are a 31-year-old recently married woman. You lost your
Sure. Okay.
severe motor I would have tragic watched your best friend die if they were going to drunk drive. Well, even though you have tried to shake the responsibilities, you may wonder why God did not protect your friend. How could a loving God take such a beautiful and bright young person? It does not appeal. You wonder how people can worship this kind of God. Boy, you don't make it easy.
Well, the point here is that these are real people, and that these are the people that come every Sunday, member or non-member. These are the kinds of people that come here for a reason. And so what are we then as hospitality, but really Christians? That's the deeper. I'm not asking you to solve it. We're not in the business of solving. We're in the business of loving here.
I really think that
Okay, folks. So what was this? What was this experience like? What was this experience like for any of you? To be handed a person, a story. What was that like? Kind of walk me through what that experience was like. Anybody? Or what did you learn, or what did you glean from it?
Did we all have the same one?
You all had different ones. There might have been a couple of similar ones, but they were all different.
Okay.
And remember, they were all real people. Yeah.
I struggled a little bit with it at first because you don't know their story when they're coming to you.
That's right.
So, you're giving me more information than I would normally have when they got there. So it made me feel like that what we do is even more important because we don't really realize that this is what's going on in their lives.
Yeah. But there's a story behind the facade that we oftentimes wear as we enter on a Sunday morning. There's this real story there. And I like to call them sacred stories. Great comment. Anything else?
I have a comment, and I know I've shared this with people before. Thank you. And I heard this years ago, and I don't remember who it was that said it, but it's something that I think about literally every time I walk into this place. Is, so many people come to church on Sunday morning or whenever with the idea, what am I going to get What am I going to get from Lewis or from whoever's preaching? But if you change that and walk in with the attitude, what am I going to give today? Forget about getting. What am I going to give? You know, by a handshake or greeting someone or whatever it is that you do. And I think that's really important for us, just to think about that. Just change your focus about what you're here for.
Yeah. Yeah, because our sacrifice in the lives of somebody else can be unreal, unbelievable.
That was a discussion at our table, how we think that probably part of this training is that we are supposed to be and being taught to be so much than just a greeter at the door. We need to really welcome and be warm and give of ourselves to make sure people know what we're all about and to give them that opportunity to come in and feel welcome.
Yeah, Bob?
I would think that if a person would come to visit for the first time, you would think that they would most likely come back for the second time. Well, once you have that person's name, I would put it on a piece of paper and secret it away in my pocket so that the next week when he comes back or she comes back, you at least remember their name, you know? That's a big step.
Yeah. Yeah, calling somebody by name is a big deal. Other reflections on the experience?
Yeah, we had two different stories at our table. One was a woman that was overwhelmed. She came from a smaller church, and she was welcomed in this church, but there were just so many opportunities and so many ministries, and she just felt that they were established, and she didn't know her place and what to do. And she thought, well, maybe I should go back to my former church. It was smaller, and at least I had a purpose there. The other story was about a very affluent man who was a leader in the community, but over time his business started to crumble, and he had 85 employees, and he was afraid to face them because he didn't want to tell them that they might be losing their job, and he has kept this a secret from everyone, including his family. What I get out of both of those stories is they're two very different people, and I think welcoming is very, very important, but I think it also needs to be individualized because what the one person needs is very different than what that other person needs. And I think we need to go beyond just welcoming, but maybe get to know that person a little bit and what do they need. Maybe they are not ready to give service right away. Maybe they do need to get a little bit at the beginning. Maybe they need to be led to the counseling ministry here. But I think if we don't get to know them, if it's just welcome everyone, treating everyone the same, we may miss some very important issues.
Yeah. Thank you.
The one thing that I have found greeting people on the north door, after church, when everyone's already up in the church and people coming out, sometimes we'll sit down and have a cup of coffee, and we will begin talking. And I learn so much about them and appreciate them more, and they do me, so that I go away feeling really good about what I maybe have helped, or maybe they've helped me in some way.
Yeah.
Well, I take a lot of things out of the Psalms and the songs that we sing here at Second Pres. But I have, on occasion, when I meet somebody new and I feel like there's a problem there, or they need to talk, or they want to talk, I will meet them after the service. And when I was talking about going back to some of the old songs there's a song in there that says, about Jesus, it says, and he walks with me, and he talks with me. And I have found that when you have a person, and they have a problem, they want to talk to you. If you sit down in a given room, it's not long before you have an entourage of friends, people who, they all gather there. So the whole thing is lost of what you are really looking for. But if you're walking with that individual and talking to him, it's a secondary action, but it's a primary effect, let me tell you.
Yeah, thank you. Any other comments? I heard one up here. In fact, it was Ron. He said he only gave us a minute to talk about this, as if it was something that took more than a minute to solve. And obviously, all the situations of our lives take more than a minute to solve. Did anyone feel a sense of intimidation by the scenario and the amount of time you were given? Yeah. And what was the answer? What insight did I kind of offer on that? That we're not here to solve the problem. We're here to love people. And so sometimes, even though the sacred story might feel overwhelming, we might not have all the resources to offer to solve the problem, but what can we give? Love. So I really appreciated that coming out, because really, you were under a time crunch. And you are on Sunday morning as well, as 200 people approach the door. That feels very, how can you get this depth of conversation so you know this level of sacred story in people's lives? But hopefully through this, you might start to gain that extra special spiritual worldview where you might to see what's unseen. And so even though a time might not allow when you're opening a door, later on when you see him standing alone, you might then faithfully engage and then get below the waterline and hear that sacred story, and then, wow, God is there in an amazing way. I really appreciated that comment. Anything else that you gleaned from this experience that would be helpful for everybody else? Yes?
For me, it made me think that maybe there needed to be a second step, that I need to, number one, sharpen my skills in greeting, but maybe the second step is I need to be more of a bridge to all of the resources that are here. I need to know what are the right questions. I need to know some of the telltale signs and be more astute, because as you said, we're in a time crunch, so maybe I also need to become a better bridge. Yeah. And then as I was sitting here, I was also thinking that it probably wouldn't be bad once or twice a year and a sharing to educate the congregation and say, when we talk about passing the friendship pad, to make a note, but maybe encourage our congregation to be more observant and to greet and pull people aside and say, can I show you the church, or what can I introduce you to? Maybe it's once or twice a year just doing that, but as hospitality individuals, I need to be a better bridge.
Yeah.
As relatively new members, we've been curious about, where to find things, where to go for this and that. I generally work at off the elevator in the atrium on the second floor as parents are coming and going with their kids. And every once in a while, a question comes up that I don't know the answer to. And so at that point, I generally start talking to the children. And I know that's not the way to handle that, but sometimes I feel like, as you're saying, smiling, shaking hands, warm greeting is the first step, but then there's that bridge thing. And in my case, it's something as simple as saying, oh, second door on the left. So I need probably to pick up a floor plan somewhere. I'm sure someone has a desk drawer full of them, but I haven't encountered that person yet.
Yeah, I think, Greg, do you want to speak to that? Just real.
I would love to speak to that. As many of you know, I do this fast tour of the church with new members, usually between 10:30 and 11, and we run through the church and I show them everything. What has come out of that? And I get extra points if I can introduce them to a pastor, and really big points if I get them to meet Lewis. What I have figured out from this is we need a handout. We need a handout that is simple, explains the basics, and it's a handout that all the greeters should have. All of you should have copies of it. We should be able to hand it out to any new member that comes in. And that's what we're working on. And it is so wonderful. I can't tell you how thrilled I am to have this young man on our team who is able to help us put all these things together. I can talk the talk, I can't write the write.
Gretchen actually had a wonderful idea earlier this morning. She said, well, what can we do beyond just this? Because I think that this invites the question of what else do we need to know? How else can we be equipped to do this really good work? So I really appreciate that, and we'll try to figure that out. Another congregation.
I think I like the idea of the bridge and a continuum, a bridge, and what Gretchen said. And I worked with Leslie Morgan and Jim Riley on developing the Second Friends program. And to some of you who are new members, I hope you got a second friend. That's been a tough program to sell to get people to participate. So maybe this hospitality group could work into that. Maybe this would be a resource for Second Friends. And what it is, and it's morphed a little bit. I'm not working with the program anymore, but it's morphed a little bit from originally. Originally, you were introduced to Second Friend the day that they joined the church. Well, that's pretty overwhelming. And now you're matched up with someone after they join. And then you follow up with them. Kind of the same thing we're talking about here. So I think that's a program that has struggled because it's the same people over and over again. And I get those emails from Leslie, we need Second Friends, and I kind of just click the discard button. And because I thought I've done that half a dozen times, or 10 times or something like that. But it has really connected me with new members in this church, and John, and the Beesons were my husband's second friend, and we're going out to dinner tonight down at our bistro for the Devour downtown. So it's just to, it's not everybody do you have a connection with, but at least it's somebody that when they come to church, they know somebody. And that was one of ours, that everybody, that they are overwhelmed because they don't know anybody in the church. So I think that's a big thing. So that, I think, thinking of a continuum of hospitality rather than isolated programs. So that was just, and then the handout, the information.
Yeah. We have time for a few more comments. This is great. This is very helpful.
Well, I can attest to God being in your life. Gretchen said, I've got to have somebody to help get the people to carry down the elements. Lewis wants them to carry the elements and put them on the communion table. And she approached my daughter, who is about as strung out as that woman is in our little... So I said to her, Gretchen, I have an idea. And let me tell you, I didn't have any choice. God just led me in the way. We have gone, our third graders, whether you know it or not, go through a communion class. Connie helps, and Carolyn Dennis does an absolutely fantastic job teaching them about the communion table. So I dipped in because I am a shepherd in the third grade. I have two grandsons in the third grade. Hopefully they both aren't there on the same day, as they were a couple Sundays ago, and I finally ended up sitting between them. And I started with the parents, and the response that I have is just absolutely fabulous. I'm going to have to do a little bit of jogging again. March has a couple days, and then I have April. But let me tell you, to meet Lewis is beyond their expectations. They just cannot believe that they get to meet him. And I'm sure when he comes up that side aisle and comes around the corner, he thinks, oh, Lord, there's Jane again. But I grab him and make sure that he shakes hands with all of the children, and they are just in awe. And then to go where he goes on Sunday morning and put the elements on the table, it makes it their church. And he is a friend. John Coppage, Karen Lang, who else is back there? But anyway, I always try to make sure that they meet the children. So if in your singing, when these young sweet things go up the aisle, if you recognize them later, please say, oh, you did a wonderful job, because they are just like this. But they're our church. And consequently, someday when we say, would you like to? They're going to say, well, yeah, I know this church. So it has just been a wonderful blessing. What do you want? Gretchen? She's a very good friend.
I do the 11 o'clock service. They love to meet Louis also. But I try to bring in the new members in there. And that's the other thing, is to bring the new members in to carry it up. But if any of you want to carry in the elements, please let me know, and I'll put you on the schedule. The other new thing we're doing that I don't know if you're aware of, and I just want you to know this, we've started a new members Christ Care class twice a month, the second and fourth Sunday from 9:30 to 10:30. The leaders are Don Morrison and Linda Snow, and they're leading us in the book, The Good and Beautiful God. And we're just going to be repeating that over and over. There will be this class will be ending in March. A new class will be starting right afterwards. Some of the people from this class are going to go back to that one because they missed the first few Sundays. They can come in at any time. It's just going to be a repeat, revolving door. But part of that group, you would be amazed at how these new members come in, and the very first time they meet, what they share and their feelings, right, Shaun? It's just beautiful, just beautiful. Shaun attends it, and Jenny Hoffman. So that's one more little bridge we're trying here. And in that class, I try to, there's my friend back there, Teresa. I also try to remind them of wonderful things that are happening in the church, like we'll be pushing the Festival of Faith, the different that they might not, be aware of. But we are making strides, and I just hope that someday we need a bigger room, because we're beginning.
We've got time for one more, and then we're going to shift gears. I think somebody else had their...
John.
Oh, go, yeah, sorry.
Well, I just wanted to say, as a new member, that we went through Gretchen's tour, and my wife and I, about 2 years ago, started looking for a new church, so we really kind of systematically went to church after church after church, and generally, we were greeted and made to feel welcome. And we came to Second Presbyterian, and we were greeted and made to feel welcome. And then we ran into Gretchen, and she latched onto us and gave us the 20-minute tour, and we saw every conference room and broom closet in the building. And it is kind of an intimidating building. It's a beautiful building, but it is big and intimidating. And Gretchen did a lot. And my wife, after we got through, said, "Who was that woman?" and this must be the place for us. And so, Gretchen, it works.
You're the bomb, Gretchen. You're the bomb.
Thank you, Gretchen. I love exercises like that because really you taught it one another, and the reflections and the experiences that you've had really came to life here, and it really was beautiful to see that hospitality in this church is really alive and is doing great things. So thank you. I want to shift gears on us this morning, and I want to tell you a quick story. As a first-year seminarian, I took a class called Worship. And it was really one of my favorite because although I enjoyed worship, I didn't know a lot about what worship really was. And early on in the semester, I was assigned a book to read, and in seminary you get lots of books to read. And this one was by Thomas G. Long. You may remember him. He came to the Festival of Faith last spring. One of the best theologians and preachers in America, and he just does an amazing job. The title of the book is called Beyond the Worship Wars, Building Vital and Faithful Worship. And he wrote it because during this time, people were arguing about what should worship look like. Should it be contemporary or traditional? All of the things that people were arguing about, he wanted to go beyond that to kind of take us backwards to move us forwards. And as he took us backwards, he kind of gave the reader, which was me, in-depth look at the theological underpinnings and foundation to worship. And I was surprised after I took the test. I'll get to that in a second. After I took the test, I realized that there were 2 chapters in here about Christian hospitality. And I've got the blue book to prove it. Remember the blue books from school? I actually geeked out, and I went up to my attic, and I found my blue book from the first test in worship class from seminary. And I remember taking the test. It was really easy. I had studied really hard, and the whole class got together, and we prepared together, and I was going through it and just checking them off and writing down all the right answers, and I thought, man, I got this one. Slam dunk. And then I got to a question later on that kind of stumbled me a little bit. Let me read this to you. And this is the question. Tom Long, in his book, asserts that hospitality is more than a friendly church. On what theological and biblical basis does he offer so we might better understand hospitality and its role in worship? And I thought, wow, that's a great question. And I didn't know the answer. And it was worth half the points on the test. Half of them. You know, I slam dunked the first half, and then I was left with that question. And I even know what I wrote down. Let me find it here. I said, Tom Long speaks of knowing somebody's name and using it. Knowing somebody's name theologically means we know their identity before God. They are cherished, gifted, and wonderful. We must care for, love, encourage, and utilize all the people that come into our church more faithfully. And I basically went on to say everyone wants to be known by their name and blah, blah, blah. I was searching for, I didn't even know what I was writing. All I remember was reading in that a couple chapters that we should remember the names of the people that come to our church. And I was trying to stretch it. Well, I think I got, 10 out of 25 on that essay. And since that day, I've been, you know when you kind of have a challenge in life and that becomes your greatest learning? Well, that became a great learning for me. And it opened my eyes up to something that brought great depth to my understanding of the world and God and us in it. And I wrote a devotional about it. And I want to share that devotion with you. It's actually in your packets. And I'm going to invite you to follow along with me today. It's not your typical one-page or half-page devotional. It's actually 5 pages. It'll take us about 15 minutes. But it speaks to folks not what we do or how we do it with hospitality, but it speaks to why we do it. And I hope it'll find meaning to you like it had meaning to me. Does everybody have a handbook? Yeah. Yeah, there are plenty over here if somebody needs them. And we decided to write this down for you because we hope that it might be useful for you for a very long time beyond today. So let's begin. And I'm on page 3, and I'm going to skip the introduction and start where it says bold, we cannot fully understand Christian hospitality until we truly understand worship. Why do people come to worship? People come to church for a number of reasons: habit, gratitude, guilt, loyalty, being coerced, having a child who needs to be brought up right, deep conviction, reasons of the heart they cannot quite name. No longer do church bells summon people to church. Instead, we live in a fragmented, diverse, and distracted society in which a cacophony of bells clang for our attention. Certainly, there is no shortage of things that occupy our time and devotion. In the midst of our changing society, we know that many people are choosing not to attend church. We live in a society in which an increasing number of people are content to practice their religion, if they have one, in isolation, finding it unnecessary or unappealing to worship in a church building with other people. Some might say, I have a commitment to God, which is beyond church. If we have to make a list of the strong asses that eat away at congregational life today, we would likely include a surge of the surging tide of individualism, pedal-to-the-metal consumerism, rootlessness, the disposition to manufacture lifestyles out of personal preferences, the loss of confidence in creeds and religious traditions, and the tendency to pick and choose religious values as if they were offered on the home shopping network of the soul. All of this invites us to wonder if congregational worship still matters. If it does, we must consider how church hospitality relates to creating a vital worship experience in the 21st century. Having already asked the question, why do people come to worship, we need to be careful how we look for answers. If we look only for what motivates people to come to worship, we could certainly accentuate those motivating aspects and make worship much more popular. At first glance, it looks easy to design and plan vital worship. At one level, this theory is true, but at another level, asking what motivates people to attend worship may turn out to be the wrong question. It is probably more meaningful to ask the question, what is worship? Worship is a necessary thing to do to be human, to join others in bowing down before God in worshipful acts of devotion, praise, obedience, thanksgiving, and petition. When all the clutter is cleared away from our lives, we do not need worship. We want worship in communion with others. The planners of worship do not make worship meaningful. Worship is already meaningful. We do not manufacture worship that addresses people's deepest needs. True worship already meets those needs. Our job then is to get the distortions out of the way and create a space for worship that is authentic and that is not obscure. Indeed, which magnifies those aspects of worship that draw people yearning to be whole. Not everything that attracts people to the sanctuary is authentic worship. Indeed, it is easier and thus more tempting to create events that we call worship, events that flatter, entertain, give cost-free therapy, provide short-term practical advice for living, or any number of superficial incentives that will gather people. If we are not careful, we can distort worship beyond recognition and mangle it into something alien, simply a mirror of the culture's current fancy. We have to keep reminding ourselves of the strange truth that, as odd as it may sound, worship is best measured not by how popular, inspirational, beautiful, educational, musically rich, poetic, or exciting it is. Indeed, true worship has its own beauty, takes dramatic shape, summons the best of language, music, and the arts, and powerfully lifts the human heart. In essence, worship is what happens when people become aware that they are in the presence of the living God. True worship is an encounter with the living God and involves human beings falling down before God's presence. Worship is about awe. For example, Moses before the burning bush could only bow down, and the disciples on the boat bowed not because they were entertained, but because they knew they were with God, Jesus. Our worship is the fullness of what pours out of us when we become aware of God's presence. Awestruck praise, immeasurable joy, trembling confession, and grateful self-giving. It is certainly possible to design worship with glittery appeal. Such worship may be high in entertainment value, may address our loneliness, and may provide actual tools for facing our problems. But these are not our deepest needs. What are our deepest needs? First and foremost, we need mystery. That is, we need God. Specifically, we need to be in communion with God, to belong to God, to be in right and loving relationship with God. Second, because we belong to God, we need to join ourselves with others who also belong to God. Together, we must give ourselves away to God and offer our lives to something larger than ourselves, something that provides meaning and lets us know that our lives count for something of ultimate value. What truly gives life meaning is not the acquisition of things for ourselves, but to the contrary, giving ourselves away, self-offering. What we really desire is to enter life's great sanctuary and symbolically place ourselves on God's altar. People are drawn to worship not only to be in the presence of God, but also in the presence of other people who know our names and shake our hands and welcome us into the circle. People desire a sense of belonging, and congregations have always known this, of course. Churches have always found ways to bring people together and address not only their needs to commune with God, but also their desire for companionship and belonging. However, it seems that there is a growing competition between our hunger for God and our hunger for human community, as if the two do not belong together. It invites an important question. Do people now want God without the entanglement of community? Or do they thirst for community without the encumbrance of God? Many say they want God, but not the community engagement. With this scenario, a picture emerges of a society of lonely religious pilgrims who seek God, who are spiritually hungry as ever, but not in a traditional way and not through traditional religious communities. In short, those people want to talk to God, but are happy to do so without talking to other people. And interestingly, this same situation can be seen in the sport of bowling, where the number of people who bowl has increased significantly, while the number of people in leagues has drastically declined. On the other hand, we are also observing an intimacy-hungry culture that is often put off by God talk, the distant mysteries of formal liturgy, and the church trappings of religion. As a result, it is tempting for church congregations to deliberately design the experience of church around these desires and move away from anything that smacks of transcendence. Perhaps their church sign should not read, "Come in to meet the holy mystery," but "Come in, be known, welcomed, and loved." One theologian observed, "People today crave intimacy. They want to be known and loved for who they are. They come to church in the hope that someone will love them, that someone will accept them just as they are. They value a warm, open environment. Worship services that promote intimacy win them over." Indeed, vital worship must elevate the mystery of God and the communal experience. Notice the word "and." The truth is that we human beings belong to both God and community. To put it more precisely, we hunger for God in community. There's no way to escape the truth that congregations are groups of people with at least a basic structure for gathering together for worship and mission. Congregational worship is not the same as private worship or interior spiritual questing. Praying and singing together creates an awareness of the other. An awareness of each other invites social and ethical expectations and demands. We cannot sit in a pew praying next to a longtime member or first-time visitor without recognizing somewhere in our soul that we are not just praying simultaneously, but that we are praying together, that at some level we belong to each other and accountable to and responsible for each other. Well, so what does this have to do with hospitality? You may be asking. Well, to be truly hospitable from a theological perspective, we must be more than friendly and intimate with one another. We are doing something remarkable on Sunday morning. We are welcoming people to worship, where they will encounter the living God, where we are welcoming people as they approach God's altar. Theologian Patrick Kiefer calls upon the church in his thinking about worship to replace the theologically insufficient category of intimacy with the more biblically accurate category of hospitality to the stranger. To put this issue of hospitality to the stranger in practical terms, imagine that you are one of the greeters at the door of the church welcoming people to worship. A couple that you do not recognize, strangers, comes to the door. How do you view these people, and what is your responsibility toward them? Should you imagine that the most important thing you may know about these visitors is that they bring needs for intimacy, and that you and the congregation are to meet those needs? Should you assume that they have come in hopes that someone will love them and that someone will accept them as who they are, and that they are warm in an open environment? To do so would be presumptuous and theologically naive. It would assume that these visitors are really like you, and that there is no difference between you and them, and that the highest goal possible is that you and the other members of the congregation will become intimate friends with them and invite them into the private spaces of your life. The reality, however, is that these people are not exactly like you. Indeed, they might not be much like you at all. They are the other, strangers, different, because they are the other. They bring the promise of gifts and wisdom the congregation does not have. Because they are different, they also bring challenges. They may be hard to accept and have needs, financial or otherwise, beyond the capacities of the congregation. Regardless of their promise or their challenges, the church is called to be hospitable to these strangers. And you are on the front lines of that ministry. The hospitality goes beyond the narrow bounds of modern notions of intimacy and friendship. We are commanded to open our house and table and God's house and table to these strangers so that they might find safe lodging, nourishment, cool water for the face, the oil of blessing, and the rest for the soul. In offering hospitality, we are being far more than a nice person issuing a cheery welcome. We are showing the hospitality of God. A life of hospitality begins in worship with recognition of God's grace and generosity. Hospitality is not first a duty and responsibility. It is first a response of love and gratitude for God's love and welcome to us. The truth is, like all of us, the stranger is on a weary and perilous journey through life, and hospitality along the road is a matter of life and death. To greet the stranger with generosity and welcome in the name of Christ, to make a place for them in God's house, is not just friendliness, it is saving grace. But even more is at stake than justice for the stranger. We show hospitality to strangers not merely because they need it, but because we need it too. The stranger at the door is the living symbol and memory that we are all strangers here. This is not our house, our table, our food, our lodging. This is God's house and table and food and lodging. We were pilgrims and wanderers, aliens and strangers, even enemies of God, but we, too, were welcomed to this place. To show hospitality to the stranger is to say that we are all beggars here together. Grace will surprise us both. When the notion of hospitality to the stranger is understood theologically and freed from the shallower notions of intimacy, we discover that welcoming people to church is far more complex than simply being a friendly church. To be sure, people need to be treated with kindness and generosity, but that is not all they need. They need to be welcomed into the house and graciously invited to the table, but that is not all they need. What do people need? Viewed theologically, people need to be welcomed into God's house, recognized by name, and join with others in offering their lives to God in acts of mission. When it is fully realized, hospitality not only welcomes strangers, it also recognizes their holiness. It sees in the stranger a person dear and made in the image of God, someone bearing the distinctive gifts that only he or she can bring. Authentic Christian hospitality is effective because it graciously makes room in God's home by people who know they are also pilgrims in God's home. God's welcome expresses itself through those people. Hospitality means primarily the creation of a free space where the stranger can enter and become a friend instead of an enemy. Hospitality does not seek to change people. Instead, it offers them space where change can take place. It is not to bring men and women over to our side, but to offer freedom for people to authentically explore where they will dance their dance, sing their song, and live their life for God. Amen. So what do you think about hospitality now? I wish I would have had that. Yeah. Well, I've also reread the books 110 times, and so it comes pretty easy at this point. So thank you to Tom Long, really is where the credit belongs. We do something really remarkable, not just on Sunday morning, but every day that we're here as we welcome people to this place. We welcome them to God. And part of this is helping prepare them to encounter that living God. And I think that's really, really a very special charge. But it's not, I think it transcends a command. I think it really is a response to the loving grace that we've already come to know at the altar of God. Amen. It's hard to go on after that one. Yeah.
Really struck by the idea that we're all strangers here.
Yeah.
That whether we've been here 2 years, 10 years, or 20 years, that we're all strangers, that this isn't our... I can talk loud enough. I was a middle school teacher. That this isn't our house, but, that we're all strangers here. And that, and if you take that attitude rather than, here's somebody new, they're not any newer than I am. I'm also new.
Yeah.
And even though I've been here 20 or 30 years, the idea that that really struck me here. And I think it's an attitudinal thing.
Yeah. It really speaks to our hearts.
Yeah.
I think it really does.
It's not my church and you're a visitor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yes, sir. I'll take that over.
I can play Laura.
Well, I see two roles because this one and what you just shared with us, and I thank you for that, really clarified my responsibility and role for the stranger. But I know that there have been weeks when I've come through that door and there have been issues in my life, and the way that some of you have greeted me makes that week and this church very special to me. So it's not just the stranger. It might be the person we sit next to. I might look over to Mike and Wanda, and we may get engaged in what's going on in their life and they're in ours. So the role is equally the person we seek all the time, but we don't know what's going on in their lives, and we have to be open and hospitable, and it's not just the stranger. I love what you shared on that, but I kind of feel like I have two roles.
Yeah. Yeah, we're the stranger and the greeter. Yeah, I appreciate that comment. Somebody else had their hand up. I don't remember who that was. Yeah, Bob?
Quickly, I think it might behoove us to pay some attention to those individuals that are greeting at the doors. What do they do to on a day-to-day basis or on a Sunday-to-Sunday basis? How do they change their dialogue? Are they different from one Sunday to the other? We can take our own good old way of doing a presentation and add some a little of this and a little of that, and it's amazing what can happen.
Yeah. Sure. It's amazing what God will do to make something happen. I appreciate that. I've got my eye on the clock, and we're a bit over the schedule. One of the things I want to draw your attention to, and I won't spend much time with it, is page 9. That I've listed some habits of hospitality. I think those are kind of helpful hints that we probably all know. I think that the most important one there is before we do the work of hospitality in serving in that way, that we ask ourselves these questions at the top. Look up, look out, look beyond, and look again. What does God want you to see, and what does God want you to do? I think all the rest of these kind of fall underneath of that. So I think as we enter the work of hospitality, that we might pray a prayer that would allow God to lead us to see what we typically would not see. Okay? I certainly invite you to take a look at those. Wish I had more time this morning to do that. But I think that will be helpful for all of us. Okay? I'm going to turn the table over to Gretchen and some other folks. Yeah.
I want to say thank you for absolutely beautifully and thoughtfully written understanding of the grace of hospitality. And, it really goes against our culture. We think of hospitality as entertaining our friends and our families and our neighbors, and it's welcoming the stranger. And you, in those succinct words, have really put what biblical hospitality is all about. And I love how you connected it to worship. And I just want to say thank you, Shaun. You worked very hard on this.
Yeah.
You're a great man.